In the world of video games, few genres inspire as much awe and excitement as mech games. These titles place players in the cockpit of massive humanoid robots known as mechs and thrust them into futuristic battles of epic proportions. Mech games have a rich history in gaming, dating back to the early days of the arcade and 8-bit console gaming. From the early days of sprawling narratives of anime and manga, the world of mech robots has evolved and expanded, captivating audiences with its blend of technology, imagination, and storytelling. Mech culture in anime and manga have collectively carved out a unique niche in the world of entertainment, captivating viewers with their larger-than-life robotic battles and futuristic settings. It's no mistake that mech culture in gaming has gone on to have a strong presence over the years in almost every generation of consoles. And over the years, the genre has evolved and expanded in many different ways, offering players more immersive experiences and pushing the boundaries of what is possible in the medium of video games. My own personal love of mech culture itself started with the show Gundam Wing and led me on a path of discovering many more mech franchises in anime and manga, and soon afterwards discovering and having a deeper appreciation of mech video game adventures on multiple consoles. Specifically, one of those games was a game like Omega Boost for the original PlayStation. So you see, I'm a simple man. When I see a video thumbnail for a trailer of what appears to be a mech game, I click on it. And on this occasion, not too long ago, what I got was a trailer for UFO Robot Grendizer, The Feast of the Wolves, developed by OnRoad and published by Microids as a multi-platforming game. I think the thing that first struck me with regards to the images and gameplay in the trailer was that everything just felt so familiar and new to me at the same time. I have frequented many anime conventions over the years and consumed an exuberant amount of anime shows and manga over time, so I'm certain that I have come across the images of the Grendizer suit and this world, but may have been something that I had glazed over. More importantly, like many Japanese anime shows of the time, it just wasn't readily available to me or accessible to watch, and I never remember it being in syndication at all in my teenage years. The gameplay in the trailer also looked incredibly familiar and reminiscent of the 2003 release of War of the Monsters for the PlayStation 2, a multiplayer fighting game where players controlled giant monsters inspired by classic movie creatures in a closed-off open-world setting. So I was sold on the trailer itself, and everything about what I saw in the gameplay just felt so reminiscent of that bygone era of closed-off open-world games. More than anything though, this was one of these franchises that when I found out about it through this game trailer, it did make me wish that I had known or partaken in it sooner. UFO Robot Grendizer blazed onto TV screens in Japan in 1975, leaving an undeniable mark on the landscape of mech storytelling. It then would eventually lead to it being distributed and syndicated in parts of North America in the early 1980s after it was translated and dubbed for English-speaking audiences. Crafted by the visionary gonagai and brought to life by Toei Animation, this epic saga unfolded over 2 action-packed seasons, captivating audiences with its thrilling blend of towering mech mayhem and intergalactic warfare. The franchise captivated audiences worldwide and has had many incarnations since, along with an exuberant amount of merchandising. Its legacy still endures to this day, ensuring its place among the stars of anime immortality, where you can now easily stream the show on services like Apple TV, and is without a doubt one of the most popular classic anime shows of its time. But believe it or not, in its 40-year history, there was never an attempt of a game release of this franchise for any video game console, that is, until now. And so, for the first time ever in gaming history, we get to strap in and climb aboard the legendary Grendizer robot mech suit in this long overdue video game from an iconic anime franchise spanning over 40 years in the world of anime and manga. Subscribe to The Select Gaming to keep up to date with all our latest videos. This is UFO Robot Grendizer, the Feast of the Wolves for The Select Gaming.
Your Highness, what are you thinking?
We've no choice.
But Grendizer hasn't been buried all these years without good reason.
Well, it's high time to wake it up then. The Vega's treachery cannot go unpunished. Grendizer, go!
Our story begins in the same way that the anime show started when it first aired in Japan from 1975 to 1977. The game follows the story of Duke Fleed, the prince of planet Fleed, who escapes to Earth after his planet is invaded by the forces of the Vega Empire. After escaping, Duke brings with him the powerful robot Grendizer to Earth, with him staying in exile as an Earthling. As a citizen of planet Earth, Duke becomes adopted by Dr. Uman, who is one of Earth's most intelligent scientists and astrologists. Dr. Uman bestows upon Duke his Earth name of Daisuke, and Daisuke's journey quickly turns into a tale where he lives out his days as a citizen of Earth, befriending the Makiba family who owns a ranch close to Dr. Uman's laboratory headquarters. All is well until 2 years after the events on planet Fleed, where the Vega Empire has tracked down Daisuke's whereabouts, and they are once again actively trying to kill him to crush the legacy of Fleed completely. And when I say Vega Empire, I'm talking about the Vega Empire led by Emperor Vega and his minions of generals, not the Vegan Empire. Daisuke embarks on an effort to defend Earth from the Vega Empire, who is now on the hunt for him. In a way, Daisuke protecting the people of Earth is almost a sort of redemption tour with a side of revenge at the same time for him. With the help of Dr. Uman, his official Earth father, Daisuke now has a stronger support system of weapons and science behind him to go up against the Vega Empire to avenge the destruction they unleashed on planet Fleed. Daisuke is aided by Dr. Uman's science colleagues and Koji Kabuto, who pilots a UFO ship to help Daisuke and his Grendizer mech take on the enemies of the Vega Empire on Earth. Altogether, these characters share the same fight against the Vega Empire's army of giant robots and their plans for earthly conquest. The game itself focuses on the first story arc of the Grendizer TV show, so fans of the show will feel right at home with how the plot unfolds. The core of the gameplay revolves around controlling Grendizer in fast-paced mech battles in sprawling, closed-off open-world landscapes that embody different environments situated in the country of Japan. Players can punch, kick, and run their way about in sprawling ocean landscapes, forestscapes, and cityscapes that fall within the order of the game's plot and story. With each new setting that serves the plot of the game, Daisuke is sent to these areas in Japan armed with the Grendizer suit to either help save or aid civilians, all while engaging in battles with different saucer beasts sent out to these locations by the Vega Empire.
Daisuke, it's the Navy. We must help them. There's the Shinkiru. It looks bad.
When navigating around the levels, objectives are laid out as waypoints on the map, in where the closer you get to a certain waypoint marker, the game's mission will then get activated for you to participate in. The objectives of the missions range from escorting some of the locals to safety to their points of destinations on the map, to going into full-on melees with saucer beasts, where your sole objective is to destroy these enemies completely. UFO Robot Grendizer sort of feels like a good old-fashioned beat-em-up game similar to the Batman Arkham games franchise. Daisuke is usually placed into situations where you are pursued by enemies and can't move on in the story unless you defeat them all. But have no fear, the Grendizer suit comes equipped with an arsenal of combos and weapons at your disposal like your shoulder boomerangs that are great at long-range attacks.
Shoulder boomerang!
Along with Grendizer's double Harken staff that packs some serious damage. Something smart that the game does with certain melee encounters is that it adds a bit of structure so that it's not completely a button masher of a game. Saucer Beast battles are structured in a way where you'll have to switch between modes of attacks to break the shields of your enemies before they start taking any damage. If an enemy has a blade symbol over their head, you'll have to use the double Harken staff to break their shield. If the enemy has an orange arrow symbol over their head, you'll have to use your anti-gravity storm attack to break that enemy's shield. Once an enemy's shield is broken, you can then punch away or use a powerful combo attack available in your arsenal for them to start taking damage until their inevitable demise. It does take a while to get used to this structure, but once you get the hang of it, it does add an additional layer of strategy to the game that does save it from being just another mindless approach to the fighting. And you won't have to worry about finding any energy canisters or life containers because the Grendizer unit is a self-healing mech robot. Just get some distance between your enemies and yourself, press up on the D-pad, and you'll slowly heal with the power from the sun. The additional gameplay modes in Grendizer come in what feels like two separate genres altogether that complement the story and the journey of the characters. From time to time, the game will go into a sort of top-down shooter where you'll control as Koji Kabuto in his UFO ship and is able to take on enemy UFO ships that the Vega Empire releases onto Earth. These sections of the game sort of turn into a more casual arcade experience with not a lot of difficulty and feels like something similar to an arcade game like Xevious, for example. These levels, however, do come with some minor repercussions, meaning if you fail, you'll have to start from the beginning of an almost 5 to 10 minute UFO battle, so stay sharp and make sure to find those life canisters along the way. These Koji sections sort of serve as an interlude to break up the gameplay and expand on Koji's own personal story, along with his background and the role he plays in aiding Daisuke, since initially meeting each other in the first act of the game to become allies. Koji also follows you loyally throughout the game, and you will notice him wandering beside you everywhere you go in the open world environments, sort of like a trusty sidekick. He doesn't really offer anything in terms of hints or clues, rather he's just there as a decorative element in the game's design. And finally, the last gameplay mode in Grendizer resembles that of a Star Fox 64 element to it, in which it transforms into a 3D scrolling aerial shooter, where you shoot enemies in front of you as you dodge from left to right across the screen, trying to avoid objects that stand in your way. All in all, Grendizer has the perfect amount of gameplay variation, and these two additional game modes help to break up the story and constant fist fights with enemies, so it doesn't make the otherwise repetitive melee battles on Earth become too repetitive. I've already mentioned the term closed-off open world a few times during this review, and reasons for that stem from the fact that the level design in Grendizer is not really open world like, let's say, a Death Stranding or a Breath of the Wild game. Grendizer presents itself in a way that its levels are that of massive open spaces, but have boundaries with a lot of invisible walls on the outskirts of certain sections. I know for some gamers, invisible walls are a big pet peeve, but for myself, it wasn't that big of a deal. It did take some time to figure out those boundaries, and it was slightly annoying when it would block you from getting to places where you know you can get to because you've been there before, but an invisible wall stands in your way, so you have to go back around to the pathway you were on prior to wandering off. I'd say the only time that these invisible walls became truly problematic was during boss battles. Now, as a whole, I enjoyed the boss battles overall. They all came with different varieties of boss characters that complemented the plot. But for some reason, the devs decided to have all these boss battle fights take place in a far more restricted area where you had less space to move around in than you had in the outside open world where most of the gameplay is carried out. In these closed-off sections where the boss battles take place is where you start to see some of the flaws in this game, and most of it comes from the camera that you are constantly having to control and reposition with the right analog stick. You see, Grendizer is a game where you have to be the hero in the story and your own cameraman too at the same time. In the main open world space, it works well because there's enough room to maneuver the camera, and it's pretty forgiving in melees because you can always run away from the action if things are getting a bit too crazy, restructure the camera, and get right back into it. But in the boss fights, the spaces are so restricted in movement that sometimes you'll run out into the distance thinking that you have more space, but really it's just an invisible wall where you've now cornered yourself. And it does make it slightly more difficult to recalculate your position in these boss battles. Your best bet if you accidentally run into an invisible wall in a boss battle is to run away in the other direction to have any chance of repositioning yourself and the camera to defend and fight again. Experienced gamers will probably moan and groan about this, but they will be able to shrug it off and continue. But I can see younger gamers struggling with something like this, as it's not all that forgiving when it comes to boss battles. They are all structured to have a second wave. After a boss's first life bar is depleted, you have a new life bar to deplete, along with an angrier, more aggressive boss to go up against. In a perfect world, the developers would have just utilized the already pre-existing open worlds to have fights in, but a lot of this could be because of the boss battle patterns that were implemented into the boss characters. I guess these smaller spaces perhaps work in a way where they allow for certain animations to be carried out, or having it more contained was probably for technical reasons that go above my knowledge and understanding of game design. There are a few occasions where the game does stutter a bit and slightly lags from all the chaos happening on screen sometimes. There's a ton of pop-in graphics that happen when you're moving around in the spaces, and that characteristic may also bug certain gamers too. It may come off as a little bit distracting at times. And then you got this guy up here who's straight up having a glitch out seizure or whatever, but a simple thing like a patch update can most certainly cure him. The thing that annoyed me the most about Grendizer when it came to invisible walls or obstructed pathways is for the missions where you have to escort villagers or citizens to waypoints. There were a few times where I accidentally strayed off course from the mission or got stuck in an invisible wall or a glitch in the game's surface. And then what ends up happening is a countdown from 10 seconds to 0, where if you don't get back on track, you are forced to start the entire mission again. And 80% of the time, this was not my fault. It literally was because of the poorly designed logistics of not showing you where the boundaries are or where you should not go outside of when it comes to these particular missions. This isn't something new to mission-based gaming. Classic Grand Theft Auto games for the PS2 had super long missions where if you failed and strayed off course too much, you'd have to start again by going back to the mission checkpoint on the map. But with Grendizer, the game ends and you are then forced to endure the atrocious load times that last almost 2 to 3 minutes, where you're then sent back to the open world level again off the top. And that's something that caught me off guard too. The load times are insanely long for this game. For something that is a next-gen game, the load times are just unacceptable, and I can really see it putting off a majority of gamers, as it does feel like time is definitely wasted waiting to get right back into the action. Still, with all the missions and side quests that you have in Grendizer, the bread and butter of this game is all about fist-to-fist fighting in these open environments, and it's all about that mighty Grendizer suit. As you can imagine, there are a ton of upgrades and maintenance that comes with saving planet Earth. Players can customize the Grendizer's weapon systems, including its ranged weapons and melee weapons. Discovering items and objects in the open environments is definitely something that the game encourages, and you'll actually have a lot of fun running at high, fast speeds, uncovering these sort of loot boxes that give way to items to help you upgrade the Grendizer's suit. The items allow for different combo attacks and stronger weapons to be purchased at the laboratory headquarters with the help of the character of Yamada. You also get the option to customize the look of the Grendizer suit from collecting these items if you're so inclined to have a different look than the suit you start off with in the game. My particular favorite was the chrome suit. He just looked so damn cool. That metal. The anime show of UFO Robot Grendizer is known for its thrilling mech battles and captivating storyline, and still to this day stands as a pinnacle of classic anime. There are a lot of things in the game that have translated over nicely in a way of honoring the source material. The level design is bright and colorful, using the color palette from the show as much as possible. The attention to detail in the mechanical designs, coupled with the vibrant colors and fluid animation, creates a visually stunning experience overall, with this very saturated color treatment of the game's art direction. Although I did question the scale and accuracy of some of the objects in comparison to the Grendizer suit at times, but not a big deal. Daisuke himself is a compelling protagonist, driven by a desire to protect Earth and avenge the destruction of his home planet Fleed. He is a courageous and noble young man who is deeply devoted to protecting people from the forces of the Vega Empire. He's characterized by his strong sense of justice and his unwavering determination to do what is right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. He's a true hero in every sense of the word. Overall, Daisuke is just such an incredibly optimistic hero that it's really hard not to like him. I mean, the dude loves a great meditation spot, and his dialogue is always mostly positive and uplifting.
The Vega would destroy the Earth and all its history. I won't allow it.
His friends and allies add depth to the story and provide moments of humor and camaraderie. And the villains in this game, led by the Emperor Vega, are suitably menacing, posing a formidable threat to our heroes. The style of the storytelling is told with some pre-rendered animated sequences, but a majority of the storytelling is told on these dialogue screens filled with text, where we get to see full character designs of whoever is speaking at the time, full frame. All of this is nicely reinforced with some strong voice acting reminiscent of the TV show.
How is Koji?
Better, I think. He's sleeping now.
Are you sure?
Yeah, he's asleep.
This was something that I greatly appreciated, since it was my first introduction to the Grendizer franchise in general, and I'm certain that fans of the show will feel right at home with this exposition. It has that old school style of anime storytelling, and that is always a welcomed approach to me, especially when its source material is based on an anime show. And not to mention, the music in this game is just so spot on. It's got that 1970s Japanese city pop funk and just adds to that excitement. With all the good and bad that comes with this game title, I just want to clarify that overall, I loved it from start to finish. It was exactly what I expected it to be, and I was so glad that I took a chance on it. It was one of my most anticipated games of 2023, and it delivered in a way where it was enjoyable regardless of these annoying flaws that I quickly got over. I think the thing with Grendizer is that it brings up a debate topic amongst gamers that sometimes questions the validity of certain games not feeling like a next-gen game. Is Grendizer revolutionary or just evolutionary? Or is it just a PS2 game in disguise? I brought up War of the Monsters for the PS2 at the start of this review in correlation to Grendizer because both those styles of gameplay feel incredibly similar, albeit Grendizer is much better overall as a game and has better graphics and sound design than a game like War of the Monsters. But is UFO Robot Grendizer a next-gen game? Does it feel like one? There have been many games where I've seen a lot of arguments where gamers will say that certain modern game graphics remind them of PS3 graphics, or the style of gameplay feels like it belongs on consoles from the past. With UFO Robot Grendizer, I will say that it felt pretty nostalgic when it worked, and when it didn't, it was a sad reminder of the many flaws of games from the past, like invisible walls and long load times. I'm okay with Grendizer feeling like a game from the past. A game from days of yore where things were simpler, more contained, and less overproduced. Games like Knack or Sonic Mania are examples of games that feel reminiscent of game titles from past consoles. And whether it's intentional or not, is that a bad thing? For me, I've played many games in my gaming career where I've constantly been wishing for a resurgence of game making from the mid-90s and early 2000s. I dream of a day where Capcom gives us a Mega Man Legends 3, or Bandai Namco randomly decides to release a Tail Concerto 2 or a Silent Bomber 2, but sadly, that's just not going to happen. I think what I've realized is that while waiting for those big companies to give me what I want in terms of an old school nostalgia factor of gaming, I'm getting that more and more these days from indie devs and from games like UFO Robot Grendizer. I think the main reason as to why I'm so forgiving of the minor flaws in games like this is that the style fits in the category of my gaming tastes from the 90s and the early 2000s. It just makes me happy that there are developers out there that creatively feel that having a fun game is more important than following the status quo. However, I do feel like some of the flaws in this game should be addressed if there is ever a sequel, and I hope that there is. I no longer depend on those big AAA companies to give me what I want. Instead, I'm looking for it elsewhere, and in that regard, UFO Robot Grendizer delivered on almost everything I wanted and expected from a game title like this. It was also a perfect introduction of this world and characters, and a positive one at that. I played this game on a PlayStation 4, and I will say one thing that UFO Robot Grendizer made me realize, and it's that the PlayStation 4 is finally showing its age when it comes to particular aspects in performance. And not in the way where the PlayStation 4 cannot handle things like performance. I mean, I played God of War Ragnarok on a PlayStation 4. I'm sure the graphics are not as good as PlayStation 5 graphics with the ray tracing and all, but the game was still superlative on a PlayStation 4. I think what I'm trying to say is that consoles like the PS4, the Nintendo Switch, and the Xbox One are starting to show their age in a way where developers are starting to look at these older consoles as a secondary afterthought and are focusing more of their resources on making the more dominant future next-gen consoles the bigger priority when it comes to performance. And in that regard, it does make sense. If you're gonna play UFO Robot Grendizer, you should probably play it on a PS5, Xbox Series S or X, or on Steam with a strong PC. This game is begging to be played on a next-gen console, and it definitely deserves that treatment. The most exciting thing about the UFO Robot Grendizer game is that it's based on the first arc of the show, which means the devs could most certainly make sequels where there can be so much more room for improvement. There is a ton of potential with a franchise like this, and I'm hoping that it does not go away anytime soon, and I don't think it will. The developers did a wonderful job capturing the energy of the anime show, and who knows, if someone like myself is discovering this franchise through this game, it could lead to some new fans who seek out this property by watching the anime show and anything else they can find out there about Grendizer. And to me, that is a promising thought and a big win for this game. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Select Gaming. If you like what you've seen and heard, give us a like and subscribe. This is Dusty Maxwell, and we'll see you on the next one.